So we'll turn to some words of Torah. We'll give Olive her first introduction to being at a Friday night service. So, over these last few days of winter break, when there was a little bit of quiet downtime, I read Rabbi Angela Buchdahl's recent memoir, Heart of a Stranger. So Rabbi Buchdahl is the senior rabbi of the renowned Central Synagogue in New York City. She's the first Asian American rabbi from Korea and the first female to lead that congregation in its 185-year history. And it's the end of the book that in these last few days has stuck with me. The second last story she tells, none of it's too much of a spoiler, the book is available, and she tells of being invited to the Seoul National University, which is the city of her birth, to be the keynote speaker as they opened their Israel Education Center in June 2024, the first Asian country to do so. And it was Rabbi Buchdahl's first trip to Korea since her ordination. And she details how it was particularly touching that this event was happening at all as a statement to the world. The opening had actually been postponed from November 2023, so we can put the pieces together. And for her to be present as a Korean Jewish woman and a rabbi. It felt like a celebration of her dual identity, and in her words, the marriage of her two primary spiritual homelands. So I was thinking about her book as I reflected that sometimes our stories lead us exactly to where we need to go. Her closing of the loop and her blending of her worlds made me think about our own current coincidence with the end of our secular year 2025 and the beginning of 2026 falling this Shabbat with Parashat Vayechi, the last portion of the book of Genesis. So put differently, one story ends and another begins. We'll start reading the book of Exodus on Sunday. So we as humans enjoy, or perhaps even need, this satisfaction of a full circle, to know that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. We can think of so many instances of this within our Jewish tradition. We've got our cycle of the festivals that we come across each year, or even with Shabbat each week as we farewell the mundane and invite in the holy, if only for 25 blessed hours. We've got rituals that mark major milestones to usher us from one chapter of our stories to the next, and if we think about it, we even have rituals within rituals as we formalize, for example, the end of a mourning period, the end of the shloshim, or the first yacht site, or an unveiling, or so on. Another indicator of how much we need this structure, this full circle, is from this past Tuesday, when we commemorated Asara B'Tevet, the 10th of the Hebrew month of Tevet. It's a minor fast day within our Jewish tradition, which means that we only fast from sunrise till sundown, from dawn until dusk. The 10th of Tevet is the day when the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar is said to have begun his siege of Jerusalem, marking the start of the fall and destruction of Jerusalem and of the Jewish community in ancient Israel, Judah, really, during the First Temple era. Asara B'Tevet is also the day that the Chief Rabbinate in 1951 declared would be a general day of mourning for Holocaust victims whose yacht sites remain unknown, intending to provide those families with an opportunity to formally grieve. I would therefore posit that the need for these touchstones is not simply for the satisfaction as we watch time go round and around. We need these markers as a container to hold all that arises from our stories, our memories, our emotions, our joys, our sorrows, and everything that contributes to our experiences and identities as humans in this complicated, messy world. For that's the other side of the coin, because during this past week, I've also come to think and to believe that the closed circle is not a very human or, in fact, Jewish phenomenon. On our own Jewish calendar, as you may already know, we actually have 4 New Years. One is Rosh Hashanah, one is Tu B'Shvat, One is in Nisan for the calculating of the years of the reign of a king, and one is in Elul for the calculating of animal tithing, so how old your livestock was. We might go through the ebbs and flows of acknowledging the passage of time, but we've got different dates for different types of counting, which means that we're always starting one cycle or ending a cycle or finding ourselves in the middle of another. So much for the perfect closed circle. Continuing in that vein, in Parashat Vayechi, we witness, finally, the reunion of Jacob, now in his old age, with his beloved son Joseph, who, after being sold to slavery in Egypt by his jealous brothers, rose to become the second in command of all the land, including taking a pivotal role in navigating a famine, which, if not for Joseph's foresight or his famous dreams, would have decimated the population. After so many years apart, this is all that they've wanted, and they are eternally grateful and grateful to the Eternal for their reunion. Joseph comes to visit his father, who by this point is ill to boot, and their interaction is nothing short of illuminating. Instead of words of love or blessing that we might have envisioned, Jacob rather makes two requests of his son. He makes Joseph swear that he'll ensure that Jacob receives a proper burial in the land of Israel, and Jacob also asks Joseph to bring his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, to meet him. Instead of Joseph being named as one of the tribes of Israel, the same as the rest of his brothers, which is detailed earlier in the parashah, Jacob instead confers this honor upon Manasseh and Ephraim, saying that they'll be two of the names of the tribes instead. And from this, we now take the invocation for our prayer over the children at the Shabbat table, the piece that we didn't hear with baby Olive, which goes, "May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh." Similarly, Joseph's story doesn't quite end in the neat bow that we might have expected it to be tied up in, especially considering that it's the end also of the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis concludes with the death of Joseph, who, on his own deathbed, requests of his brothers that they take up his bones to the land where God has noticed them, i.e., the land of Israel. We subsequently learn that Joseph is embalmed and placed in a coffin, typical of Egyptian custom, but the book ends before we learn whether he's granted his final wish. That is, until our people leave Egypt in our next book of the Torah, Exodus, in which we are told, and will learn in a few weeks' time, that it was the Israelites who remembered to fulfill Joseph's last dream. Yet this insertion feels like a rather random addition to a text that is or will otherwise detail the drama of our early ancestors' escape and their wilderness wanderings. Clearly, the biblical author also wanted, or perhaps needed, to feel like the story had come full circle. And this brings us back to Rabbi Buchtal. The final episode in her memoir that she recounts is called Homecoming. She picks up after her address at Seoul National University and details the rest of her travels with her mother and her daughter. Her mother is Korean, and there are then 3 generations of the women of her family making this beautiful pilgrimage to the place of their roots and origins. One day on this trip, she describes how they hike up to a temple near the hometown of Rabbi Buchtal's mother, where the graves of her grandparents lie. It's customary, I learned from the book, for Koreans to pay homage to ancestors by pouring libations, bringing tributes of food, and to share life updates and words of love when they visit these burial sites. Rabbi Buchtal tells her grandmother of how her family moved to America, which happened when Rabbi Buchtal was like 4 or 5, and of how she ultimately became a rabbi and a mother, and of how, whilst a proud Jew, her Korean ancestry never stopped being a part of her. She hopes that her grandmother would be proud of her. Rabbi Buchtal ends her homage by reciting Kaddish together with her daughter, and points out the constellation of factors at play in this moment. That it's a Jewish prayer, which is really written in Aramaic, being offered for Korean ancestors by her grandmother's American family. So upon reflection, this might not be a full circle moment. It might have been, if it was, when I thought about it might have been if it was a reunion with her grandparents, if they had still been living after these few decades, or if she'd learned fluent Korean again, or something of the sorts. But rather, I reflected that hilltop homage felt like a measuring stick of where she came from, how far she'd come, and a deep expression of all the elements that make up her multifaceted identity. So in entering the secular year of 2026, this is my prayer for you. That we see our calendar not as closing circles, but as markers along our human journey, which allow us to appreciate our narrative arcs, whether ancient or modern, and allow us to express the very fullness of our beings. We humans are complicated after all, so may it be a year of being able to embrace the human, and may you be led to exactly where you need to go. Happy 2026 and Shabbat Shalom.